All right, so today I'd like to talk about a general theme in coaching and sport parenting called autonomy support. And building our autonomy in our athletes is a great way to get those athletes to become much more responsible adults and also better competitors in our programs and at our competitions. And when we talk about autonomy itself, it's Greek for self-law or self-naming. And it's really the idea that our athlete is going to take charge of their own life. They're going to start making their own decisions and really becoming part of the process of creating these programs and getting ourselves competition ready. There's a certain kind of style that we'll use, coaching and parenting, that can bring out these internal motivations, and we call that autonomy support. And this is an interpersonal connection that a coach will have with their athletes that's going to lead for the athlete to start to develop and nurture their own internal motivations and their own internal motivation process. So it's really a way of getting the athlete to take charge, take the reins themselves, and really be a more independent athlete. Now, it's very common for us to confuse certain types of autonomous behaviors with controlling behaviors. And controlling behaviors are very similar because they get the same kind of job done, except they do that by using pressure and pressuring our athletes, using certain things like certain incentives like punishments. If they do something wrong, they're going to have to do a certain exercise or something like that. And this kind of pressure doesn't really lead to the growth of our athletes and the nurturing that we're looking for, the kind of growth that's going to lead to success outside of our programs and in college and in school and in the workplace. In general, what we want to do is, as we're in the gym, find different ways that we can display a lot of patience for the learning process. Sometimes we want these skills to be learned at a time that might not be convenient for our athletes, and sometimes that comes across. So it's really important for us to take our time and nurture the athlete's own inner motivational skills. And we can really do that by inquiring with them about how important the skills they're trying to learn are, how confident they are that they can do these skills in an effective and safe manner. And we can also use adequate progressions in our coaching. And that's a really good way to boost your athlete's confidence. Then that way, if we take too big of steps in our progressions, you're going to see it in your athlete's emotion, and it gives you a good place to turn it down a little bit. And as you're coaching, using explanations and rational explanations as we're talking to our athletes, rather than using the old "because I said so," is really going to engage your athlete into the process. And by using that informative language, our athletes now feel like they're becoming experts in this field. And that is something that's very motivating for an athlete. So when we're with our athletes, too many of us are talking first and listening later. And I think in general, we'll do much better if we open our ears before we open our mouths and really get a good understanding of where our athlete is right now in this process. And if we can understand where they are in this process, it gives us a lot of motivation in how we can push them forward. And during the process of this, we find that our athletes do an awful lot of emoting. They're going to have emotions, positive and negative emotions. And in an autonomy supportive environment, those emotions are acknowledged and they're let to roam freely rather than suppressed if they're negative. Because if an athlete were to say something negative, a lot of coaches don't like to hear it. So in general, when we find autonomy supportive behaviors in coaches and in programs, we see that in a very patient style of coaching with an awful lot of support rather than incentive. You know, we feel in our worlds that if we add an incentive or a punishment that we're going to get a better result from our athletes, but the research doesn't show that at all. The research tells us that the sport itself is enough of a reward and enough of a punishment. So adding external rewards like a candy if they do a certain new skill or something, it doesn't help. In fact, they find it hurts. So we want their own internal motivations and not external motivations to be the ones that are pushing them to learn these new skills. So in closing, I'd like to say that autonomy supportive behaviors in your program are not only going to increase the performance level of your athletes, but it's also going to raise a new generation of young adults that are going to be very strong, and they're also going to take charge of their own lives rather than being controlled all the time. Because we find that when we use controlling behaviors to coach, our athletes will look for controlling behaviors in their relationships outside of these programs. Someone with high autonomy is going to have higher happiness, better health, even more success in life. And we know that people that are raised with controlling behaviors are much more likely to be mistreated and taken advantage of. So coaches have an opportunity, and I would say a responsibility, to use supportive behaviors for autonomy in our programs so we can prepare our athletes for life outside of All-Star. Thank you.